Hello and welcome to the Byte Digital podcast with Leeds Building Society and Digital, where we hope to talk about some interesting digital topics that we're all very much passionate about. We'll be releasing 2 podcasts, one for each week of Leeds Digital Festival, and we very much hope you enjoy listening. Let's begin, shall we? Awesome. So hello and welcome to episode 2. So this one is how to harness artificial intelligence. So my name's Craig Mundy and I have the pleasure of hosting this podcast with an eclectic mix of guests who I'll introduce shortly. But for those of you who don't know me, my name's Craig Mundy. I'm a Senior Delivery Manager at Leeds Building Society and I'm responsible for the digital transformation at Leeds Building Society. My background is not technical, so I'm just going to throw that out there right now as a caveat. But I am joined today by some very technical people, and I would go as far to say as subject matter experts, just to put the pressure on the three of you. So we've got Adam Hall from Digital. So Adam is a principal technologist. He hates a boring meeting and will do anything to make teams enjoy the way that they spend time together, which is very good.
Yeah.
Whether it's through energetic speaking or playful workshops or even just stopping a non-constructive meeting, he's always looking at ways to push teams to collaborate better and have fun while they do it.
Cool. Thank you very much for having me, Craig.
You can tell that they wrote their own bios, right? Because awesome. Okay, and then with me from Leeds Building Society, we've got Khalid Mahmood, who's a business analyst at Leeds Building Society in our savings and digital department. Khalid is working to shape new initiatives which improve our customer and colleague journeys. You have a keen interest in generative AI and how we can use it to better serve our members, and also, in fact, you're currently going through the process of setting up a proof of concept LLM trial. So it's safe to say you're very much pro generative AI.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely pro, cautiously pro.
Okay, good stuff. And last but by no means least, and someone with the best name, we have Steve Love, who is the principal development engineer at Leeds Building Society. So you provide technical leadership for the development teams. You've got a background in writing code in a variety of languages and industries, and writing and talking about code in magazines and at conferences. So a potential pro on our cards here. Steve is cautiously optimistic about how AI can help to reduce the grunt work of coding, allowing developers to concentrate on more important things.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Craig.
Brilliant. Okay, so I think we've got the right people in the room. So you may have guessed it. We're going to talk about AI today. So it's a hot topic, isn't it? It's in, I would describe as a bit of a media hype cycle at the moment. And I've had a range of conversations on AI and generative AI. Everything from the person who cuts my hair to my mother-in-law to my wife. And those conversations range from, is it the end of the world? Is a robot going to replace your job? Do you need to do any work anymore? Because can't you just ask AI to do it for you? They can pull together a better presentation than you can. So the conversation is vast and lots of people have an opinion on it. And I think that's probably because it's in the media a lot at the moment. But let's kick off then. So Steve, can you start with giving us some definitional clarity on what we mean by AI?
Well, I can try a little bit. So there are lots of terms around AI that get bandied around and some of them are used interchangeably. So I quite often hear AI or artificial intelligence and machine learning as used interchangeably, and I think they are different things. But where machine learning, so the learning gives it away. It's machines actually trying to improve their understanding, I suppose is not an unfair way of putting it, increasing the knowledge that they have available and learning to interpret that information in different ways. Whereas artificial intelligence is more of an umbrella term that covers quite a lot of different bits and pieces. But at its heart, it's not really a new idea. It's been around since the 1950s. Alan Turing famously had a thought experiment around whether humans were distinguishable from intelligent machines. And he really wanted something to play chess with. So, artificially intelligent computers is definitely not a new idea, but generative AI, in the way that we're going to talk about it, I think a little bit, I think that is new. although it still harps back to some of those early historical definitions.
I think to add to that, I think new in the sense that the data sets that are available to train the models on are now vast compared to what they were. The technology itself isn't that novel. Is the fact that there's a huge amount of data that they can be trained on that makes them so powerful, I think.
Yeah, and the processing time that it would take to actually work out the intelligence, let's say, around things. So because of these advancements, now is the time that it's all come together, and we've seen these amazing tools like ChatGPT, and suddenly everybody's wowed, and they're thinking, where did this come from? But it is a natural evolution, like you said.
Yeah, definitely. Let's get straight into asking one of the big scary questions that I think it was the person who cuts my hair fired at me. So, is AI going to take my job, your jobs, other people's jobs?
So I would say depends what time frame you're talking about. Immediately, no. Medium term, probably no. I think that AI will serve to. I mean, there's a reason it's in the zeitgeist. People are worried about these things. However, I think there are so many intermediary stages before you even need to worry about AI taking your job that it's a faraway concern. Still valid, but far away. I think in the short to medium term, it will actually increase the number of jobs. So, as a single example, there's a new industry of prompt creation. Prompt engineer is a new role that didn't exist, 5 years ago, probably. So being someone who can harness the technology well for your company or your industry, that's a new skill that's evolved out of the technology. So I'd say there's lots of, whether you're a developer or, even someone who's at the front end using these types of tools, there's plenty of more jobs that will come out of it before it does anything to take away jobs, I would say.
Okay. Can you just bring to life prompt engineer?
Sorry. So an LLM is only as good as the thing you ask it to do. So if you don't give an LLM, these are large language models, unless you give it all the context it needs to give you a useful answer, you're not going to get a useful answer. So prompt engineer is someone who's conscious of that, and who can take, say, the request from a business colleague who needs something but doesn't quite know how to frame it, and can take that request, put it into the LLM in such a way that the output's going to be directly usable by that colleague or by that business user. So that's what prompt engineer does.
Okay. So someone responsible for quality and equaling quality.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. I mean, so to go a little more on that, I do think you can look at history, right? So the printing press was invented, and there were hundreds of scribes who would say, this is taking our job. We can no longer be the sole people responsible for creating books. But what it actually did is it created new industries in terms of construction of this equipment and maintenance of this equipment, not even thinking of the fact that books could now be generated by much less privileged people in society. So we saw authors actually come as a result of that. So we don't know where the jobs will be. So prompt engineering is what we can see now. Something in the future, like we don't know where it will take us, but suddenly people have the ability to be more productive as a result of generative AI. And I think that's the exciting bit.
Yeah, I just to tack onto that, I would say absolutely I agree. And I think it's the drudgery. No one goes into work in the morning thinking, I can't wait to use Excel to generate a spreadsheet or, get some answers out of some data. So all of that, who doesn't want that to be taken away and made easier? So it's not taking any value or, enjoyment away from what you actually want to do. Those are just sort of admin. And I can't think of anyone who enjoys that.
Okay. So what we're talking about there, actually, it's might or might not take away the whole job. It might actually take away the bits that you don't like doing from the job. And also, a bit like the prompt engineer, it's created a new job, hasn't it? So that's a new role and a new job for someone to do. So it's probably best described as may change the landscape of your job, but not necessarily for the worse. It might actually be for the better.
Yeah, probably.
And I think, speaking, as the programmer in the room, we work at increasingly high levels of abstraction in coding with exactly the same result. And it allows you to concentrate on bigger picture stuff rather than being stuck in the weeds.
Okay, Awesome.
Oh, sorry, I'll
Yeah.
say one more thing. So, your hairdresser asked you that question, and actually, your hairdresser is probably the best person to not be replaced by large language models.
Yeah.
So, OpenAI, who are the people who made ChatGPT, which is one of these large language models, they released a report in March, and it said that the people who are most likely to have parts of their job replaced by AI are higher earners, they're knowledge workers, and they're probably university educated. So it's very interesting as a product. Like, it's not what you would typically think is the first jobs to go. And I guess that's where people are quite nervous about this technology. But I see it as, if you're suddenly 50% more productive at some of the tasks you can do, that means you've got 50% more to give in other areas.
Yeah.
That's the exciting bit.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Very, very, very well put. I saw a awesome piece of advertising from a construction company, and it was they had kind of got halfway up the building, and the rest of the scaffolding on the higher floors had a big banner wrapped around it, and it said, "AI won't take these jobs," because which I really, really liked. Cool. Okay, so moving on to another common query. Let's say this is my mother-in-law's one. Do I need to be technical or learn something technical in order to use and benefit from AI?
So this harks back to Khaled's prompt engineering. So that's quite a specific and very technical skill, where, because you need to frame your questions so precisely and actually provide all of the parameters and constraints in order to tailor the output that you want. And so that is a technical skill. But that doesn't mean that everybody using generative AI or large language models needs those skills, because you can still get productive results out just by asking simple questions. And also there's loads.
Yeah. And like you say, it's asking questions. So these are the same things we do when we're conversing with human beings.
Yes.
So the actual skills that you need to know are clarity of thought, being able to structure your question and then delivering your question. And if you don't get the output you want, you tweak it. And these are the skills that any leader should have in an organization. So it's, how can I visualize, how can I say the thing that I want to say? Can I say it in a concise way that isn't confusing? Set clear goals. Another example of prompt engineering is just leading by example. So say, if I give you this, I want this output. If I give you this, I want this output. If you lead it in the direction you want it to behave, then it's more likely to behave the way you want it to.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I think it serves to democratize technology. It makes it more accessible for everyone. It's not an exclusive type of technology, and I think it will in a way bleed into traditional software development. So does anyone remember Clippy? Yeah. And so Clippy was, in a sense, a smart assistant, and it would help you with things that it thought you wanted to do, and give you shortcuts. And we don't have Clippy anymore because it's now integrated into, the little search bar at the top of Office suites, where you can just type in, I want to print, or, search a functionality. So I think with LLMs, we'll probably see the most used functionalities of LLMs being built into our software going forward anyway. So I think it's gonna feed into traditional software development in certain ways, and I think that's for the benefit of everyone. Because not everyone using Word is a tech genius, obviously, and they will benefit from this.
I'm going to throw in a bomb here.
Go on.
So one of the problems about the way large language models at the moment are designed is it's based around Western language, where the sequence of words matters in this particular way. So yes, it makes it easier for anyone using these types of language with this type of language architecture, but it doesn't get instantly and automatically applied to other types of language structures. So yes, it does close the digital skills gap in that way, but I do think we need to be cautious that we're not widening the gap for other dialects.
Agreed. I think, as soon as you talk about the global view of things, maybe there's work needed. I think, for sure. I would agree.
There already seems to be an element of at least the biggest public-facing large language models like ChatGPT already starting to become echo chambers of themselves. So reproducing output that it already generated in a past conversation, and that we all know how echo chambers like that end up. It just becomes a little bubble that is self-repeating. So I think that there is work going on to try to avoid or at least to minimise the impact of that. But it's the challenge coming.
It's unavoidable because as it stands, it's unavoidable because they're trained on corpuses that are human generated. So it's all our own stuff. And if our own stuff is biased in one way or the other, then that's what it will feed back by default. But that will improve, I think, over time. The more it gets used, the more things that are fed into it, the more broad those corpuses become. I think it has to improve. It will, naturally. Yeah.
Okay. That probably leads us on to another question then. So I think we've briefly touched on it here. Is AI mature enough for us to use today? 'Cause I think people will be scared of, I know we've spoke about actually it's been around for a long time, but actually it feels like it's still in its early infancy. And if people are using it, are people ready to use it? Is it ready to be used?
Cop-out answer, but I think it depends. So AI is, like you were saying, Steve, it's a broad term. We use it already. We do. It's definitely mature enough. LBS has several implementations. We've got, I'll let you talk in a sec about Dynatrace, but we use it to, in our contact center, we use it to predict call volumes based on historic patterns. It's not generative AI, but it's predictive. And that helps us sort of manage what our staff are doing to best serve the customers. So we do use it. We use it in our mailroom, for example, to determine, Mr. Smith has sent us a letter. It says, it doesn't have an account number on it, but he mentions the word maturity. So it's send it to that department. We do use it. It's definitely mature enough to use. The more recent things like LLMs, I would say they're definitely mature, but we have to be cautious. So currently we are, it's one thing you mentioned in the intro. I'm currently trying to get an LLM pilot set up. So the benefit of that is essentially any colleague that we have that has a high throughput can automate an element of their workflow. Now, we have to prove that. So part of my work has been to assess which departments would be most amenable to an LLM. And then we prove it. And then when we prove it, we can implement it further. But there's cautiousness that goes with it. So we're not just, saying, have an LLM, do what you like with it. It's have an LLM, try it, report back on how it's benefited you, and then we'll build from there.
Okay.
Steve, do you want to talk about Dynatrace?
Yeah, so the Dynatrace is another good example. Again, it's predictive rather than generative AI. So it's trying to interpret an existing corpus of data and apply it to something it's never seen before. And in the case of Dynatrace, that's about application and systems monitoring. So that, again, that has a direct knock-on effect to colleague experiences and member experiences, because Dynatrace, to a point, is able to predict if a system is about to fail. But importantly, it can do that before it actually goes down. So that's kind of its principal thing, if you like. And that's how, having something like Dynatrace that has a holistic view of those systems and can do a lot of the data analysis on what is quite a large amount of data in terms of, big estate systems monitoring. Think about developers trawling through log files looking for root cause problems, and the Dynatrace can do that in seconds. So it takes away partly the uncertainty, but it takes away the grunt work.
Yeah, no, I think that they're good examples of using AI properly, and I've seen organizations look at new technology like large language models and accidentally go misusing them. So one that springs to mind is you could write a recommendation engine that looks at a product on a product details page and tries to determine matching products. Now, that is a really good case for predictive AI, so not generative AI. But you can use large language models to do it. And it's quite a nice thought experiment, and you get good results. But it probably is an expensive way to use AI properly. So the best thing is, if it's complex situation that requires large amounts of data that will predict things based on that data set, you should use predictive AI models. If you're trying to create and generate, this is why it's called generative AI, if you're trying to generate information, documents, then generative AI is a good solution for that. So in this example, they had the recommendation engine, but as a result, they could create a chatbot that made it sound more human about what it was recommending. And suddenly you can drop that chatbot into places it didn't exist before, which I think is really exciting. So one of the things I think we're going to see as a result of generative AI is a shift away from websites as they're working right now. Search engine optimization was all about trying to maximize the amount of eyeballs on a given web page by making it friendly to bots. And now we've got bots writing content for bots. I think the future of websites can't be bots writing content for bots, because then the humans aren't needed. The humans actually want virtual assistants to help them find information for them. So I think we will start to see more assistant-style models. And so using large language models to create a very bespoke experience for an individual user is probably the direction we're heading.
And I would, I agree with that. And I would also add in, if you think about the types of challenges that we face, say in digital in terms of accessibility, making sure users get an experience that's suited to them, an LLM could take care of all of that, if implemented correctly. So I think there's huge benefits. One potential bottleneck that I was actually reading about yesterday, I was reading an article by Dr. Gareth Whiteley, who does a lot of work with the NHS. And he was talking about the potential for implementation of predictive AI in the ambulance service. And, you could have call handlers who, the calls are assessed on a live basis. You could have an ambulance who can dictate their notes as they're driving, the ambulance driver. But the bottleneck to all of this was the fact that the data needs to be there. It needs to be expansive enough, refreshed, if not real time, in near real time. It needs to be appropriate. The problem is a lot of data sets that exist were not built from the ground up for AI purposes, so they're not suited. It's akin to self-driving cars. They can only really be fully self-driving when they've got an idea of what all the other cars on the road are doing and what's coming up ahead, and they need to be able to communicate with each other in real time. And then when we've got that, we'll have cars whizzing around at 100 miles an hour with minimal risk. But you need the infrastructure, i.e. the data, to be there before that can happen. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. Data is the new oil, but it needs to be properly structured.
Yeah,
I'd say.
Okay. I mean, we've touched a bit on it there in terms of the benefits of AI. And actually, what's interesting is we are, as colleagues and as members, benefiting from AI right now. We probably just don't know about it, and it hasn't been shouted about in terms of what's going on in the contact center, what's going on in the mailroom. What are the specific benefits of using it right now, and in particular that the society can benefit from, or other kind of organizations of our kind of size, caliber, and within the financial service industry?
So I'd say what kind of touched on it before is the personalization. Is the fact that we can know what's right for a customer based on the information we hold about them and what they give us. I would say that, I personally don't think we're in a position yet to, I wouldn't ever want a member to walk into a branch and be faced with an iPad with ChatGPT loaded up on it. We still need members at the front line to be dealt with by people, real people, who can understand, if I got you, say you came into a branch and I got you to read terms and conditions in front of me, say, I don't know if this ever happens, but, I need you to read the terms here, and I see you reading it and I can kind of detect you looked a bit unsure, and I can do that as a human being. I can see that cue, whereas an LLM's not yet, not for a very long time. So I think the benefit that we have is we take away, as we said earlier, the drudgery of, form filling and record keeping and all the rest of this admin type of thing, to free up, and not just free up, but improve the resolution of the interactions between our colleagues and our members. So I think that's where the real benefit comes in. It's freeing up our staff from the stuff that takes their time away from actually servicing our members. So that's where I think the real value is.
Okay, and that's a really good example of back to actually the title of the this particular podcast, and harnessing AI, harnessing it rather than it replacing everything. So that's a really good example, actually, how you harness AI, which is often seen as like a digital capability and functionality, but within the branch network.
It's an enabler, for sure. It's an enabler. The contact center is a great example where you take the information about what customers have done in the past and you use that information to better serve them. It's not don't ring us. It's not don't take the time to call us. It's definitely take time to call us, speak to us. We are more than happy to help customers on the front line. But then in the background, AI is taking care of all the things that enable us to free up the staff to do that. It's absolutely powerful at the moment.
Like, the worst thing you can do when you call up a call center is being passed from one part to another. Triaging is a perfect use of artificial intelligence. If you know where it needs to get to, you can have human contact as soon as possible. Yeah, like that's the dream. So,
Steve, anything to add on the benefits that we can be utilising?
Not really anything to add. I kind of want to make the point a little bit more strongly about the automation side and freeing up people from repetitive administrative tasks that computers are good at.
Yeah.
Whether it's AI or just, digital technology in more general terms. It's a step on that road to reducing the need for the repetitive drudge tasks, if you like, the grunt work I referred to before.
Yeah.
I just to add on to that, so I've characterized it as well as the kind of grunt work and the drudgery of it all, but actually I think it goes a little further than that. So the trial that we're looking at the moment also includes creative staff. So there are things that we do, even from a creative point of view or from an accessibility point of view, that are repeated. So for example, say a piece of copy comes through and we need to make sure that it is using all the right features. So, words are written instead of as actual numbers, things like this. A human does that. But it would be trivially easy for an LLM to just, take the information that you give it, apply all the rules that we tell it to apply, and that's saved, hours of work.
Very good point.
Yeah. And so definitely the boring admin stuff, but also the more creative stuff that actually you wouldn't automatically think would be suitable for an LLM. They're actually really good at that too. And generating content as well, to some extent. It still needs a human in the loop at every point. So again, you would never let the LLM loose and just say, here, go create some copy for an advert. It wouldn't do a good job. You still need a human in the loop to kind of nanny it through the phases, I would say.
Okay.
Should we mention the things you shouldn't do with LLMs?
Yeah, it's all been a bit too positive and
Yeah.
Go on, give the people what they want.
Well, so one of the terms you'll hear banded around is hallucinations.
Don't say that around Steve.
Hallucinations are basically when it gives you the wrong information. So maybe I'm going to nerd out a little bit on how LLMs work. So large language models work by looking at the trillions of data rows that are in the database behind the scenes and looks at the frequency of certain words coming after other words. So, if it saw the words Leeds building, the most likely next word will probably be society, because Leeds building society. It just makes sense. But all it's doing is predicting what is the most likely word that comes next. It throws in a little bit of chaos in there, so there is randomness. But the emergent behavior is what looks incredibly lifelike. It looks like real words that have been said. It doesn't know what a Leeds building society is, but it does know that Leeds building probably means society comes next, and then it will just make up the next word after that. So it doesn't know what it's saying, and as a result, it hallucinates. It just makes random things up.
I think that's why Steve kind of has an allergic reaction to the word hallucination, because it's an error, really, as you say. It's just an error.
In human terms, it is.
Yeah. This is the thing. There's a danger of anthropomorphizing the tool when really there's no way. It's just a tool. It's like saying Word understands what you mean when you type something into it. It doesn't. It's just a tool.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the dangers is we think of it as a one of us, and it's really not. It's really just a tool that's generating based on what it's been fed.
Mentioned earlier on about terms that are interchangeable, and it's the difference between comprehension and understanding. So LLMs are good at comprehension, but they have no understanding.
Yeah, that's very well put, actually. What about the ethical angle? Because this comes up a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's something that again the pilot we had to consider, because what are the ethics of, this is all very new stuff. What are the ethics of a colleague who, say, for example, I mean, we didn't have this scenario, but let's say a colleague who spends 50 hours a week writing copy, and then they have a tool that can halve the amount of time that they spend on that. Is it ethical? Should that colleague be using an LLM? And I think it's kind of an open question for now, because what they're doing is they're freeing up their time to make the copy better once the 50% of their time's freed up. So I think it's ethical. I think that there's a difference between the various LLMs in terms of what they say about copyright. So there's that aspect to consider as well. Yeah, it is generated by something that's been built by a company at the end of the day, so you have to consider copyright issues. And yeah, so I think it is ethical, but there's caveats always, I would say. Don't know if you guys think differently.
I think there are definitely caveats. I've used LLMs to try to find inspiration for things like talk titles or the abstract for a talk to send off as a pitch or whatever. But it's always been for an inspiration rather than ask it to generate it for me. So I'm my own human in the loop, if you like, on that one. But it's from that point of view, I don't see that there's a problem with ethics, even if the content that's been generated for me to evaluate is effectively copied from somebody else verbatim. So I wouldn't be able to use it personally, but I'm not attempting to do that. So there has to be some element of, what's the word I'm scratching around for? Discernment.
Discernment, yeah, exactly. And it's really good. So you ask one of these to write you 10 talk titles, and you spot one you like.
Exactly.
And you go, okay, well, the first thing you should do, even if you think up a talk title, is just make sure no one else has used it before. Because if it's that good, it probably has been used. I think another aspect of the ethics is kind of the social bias that can be in an LMN. So it is trained on the internet, and I do think people are aware that the internet isn't always rose-tinted glasses. So that means any social bias can be in that data set, and it could be the next word that comes out of ChatGPT or one of the others.
That's really interesting, because I wanted to delve a little bit deeper into the bias, because I was reading an article, I think it was only last night, about the political bias that was starting to come out. And I guess, as you say, if the things that are going into it are people generated, and it's the stuff of the internet, it's always going to have a bias. So how do will it always have a bias, and how do we kind of prepare and balance out that bias when we're using it?
Yeah, I think it will always have a bias, whilst it's not a new type of being. It's just as reflected back, on us. So I think you have to be aware of the bias, and I think you have to kind of adjust for it once you deal with an output. But it's not just political bias. There's all sorts of biases that it has built in. So as a silly example, if you went on to one of these LLMs and you typed in, show me how to cook a chicken, it would happily do that. And if you said, draw me a picture of chicken being cooked, it would happily do that. If, however, you went on there and said, show me a picture of a cat being cooked, it wouldn't do it. Now, that works for us because in this society we don't do that, obviously. But there's a bias there. And then there's all kinds of other biases that, work fine for our purposes, but might not work elsewhere. So I think it's just a case of being aware of them. And maybe in the future we can have something that, at the moment we have plagiarism checkers that will check if an output has been used elsewhere and to what extent. Could also have something that tests for bias and also measures for hallucination, because as we were talking about before, an LLM will invariably give you an answer quite confidently, not giving you a confidence score on the output. So it could tell you something that's completely made up and not based in reality whatsoever, but it will present it the same way it would if it was giving you something that was factual. So I think we need to not be fully reliant. This is part of always having a human in the loop and always having safety nets built in, I would say.
Yeah. I really want to sort of double down on that. Like, we are the responsible people in the room. So as in, when you are using one of these, you're responsible for making sure you remove that social bias. So if you query something and it doesn't feel right, don't trust the computer. You are human and you can decide. So yes, I love the idea of having a weighted score to work out, is it gender neutral? Is it not politically neutral?
I think there's a disparity between the big LLMs anyway, in the sense that some will show you they're working. They will say, well, here's the answer and here's the sources that I used, but others don't. So I think, but in future, it might be better to have the option on any LLM to say, show me your working. Where did this come from? And what have you applied to it to give me this output? Because then you can see all the working and figure out if you can see the bias. If it's giving you a political answer that's left leaning and it shows you all the publications that it's taken it from, then you can make a judgment. And if it's a mixture of left and right or center, then you can see all that in its sourcing, I think.
One step further into the darkness. In terms of
giant leap.
Yeah, this is actually quite a giant leap. So again we talk about the biases, which is really interesting because obviously the internet's biased. Everyone has their own kind of conscious and unconscious biases as well. That's feeding into it. I think a lot of people get scared when it starts to think for itself.
That's AGI.
Can you explain the difference? And that's the thing that I see the media hype cycle scaring people with. So what's the difference, and how scared should people be in your opinion?
We were talking before, and I was saying that my earliest sort of the first time I saw it, I was Star Trek, where you've got the computer and you've got the holodeck and the replicator and all of that. It was all quite neutral. It was computer tell me this, computer tell me that, and it was all quite fact based. I think the difference, if we're talking about AGI, I'll let you give the proper definition, but I think for me the difference with AGI is it has agency. So the thing that you're speaking to has moral agency in and of itself, or at least behavioral agency. Is that about right for AGI?
I think so, yeah. So, AGI is artificial general intelligence. So most of the AI tools that we have available are pretty specialized. So there are AI tools to play Go, famously, chess, to summarize stuff on the internet, ChatGPT. But they are pretty specialized in what they do. You can't really expect, and don't know, haven't tried asking ChatGPT for a game of Go, but I suspect it wouldn't be very good at it. The idea behind AGI is that it is a more generally adaptable intelligence that could put its mind to anything in the way that we can, for example. And we put our minds to something, we can learn a new skill. And at the moment, the AI tools really can't. They have to be trained extensively on a particular thing in order to learn how to interpret that information. So as far as I'm aware, AGI doesn't really exist as a thing at the moment outside of science fiction, but it is a road that we're on, for sure.
I think, is it AlphaGo, the Google one, where the first introduction it had to Go was where they allowed it to see previous computers attempt to play Go. I think within, was it 4 hours, it not only learned Go, it became better than any Go computer player in the past, and better than any human player. So the AI system trained itself in a few hours to be the best at it.
I think I remember reading about that.
I'm pretty sure it's long ago where it learned independently to play itself.
Yeah.
So give it that was the key to its sudden exponential improvement. Yeah.
So therefore, it didn't need any more human input.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
and it got better than the humans. But what's really interesting, there's another conclusion to this story, in that when the humans started playing AlphaGo, they got better. So actually world rankings weren't climbing very much over time, and suddenly you get somebody who's markedly better into the equation, and it improves humanity
Yes.
as a result.
I would tack on to that as soon as we get AGI, I think we get left behind. I think so. When talk about a calculator, no one's ever going to say, put your calculator where I've got this. The calculator will always beat a human when it comes to maths, and not just in terms of what it can do, it's the speed at which it can do it. It's never going to get tired. It's never going to need to take a loo break or whatever. It's just going to be working. So I think once we get AGI, then there's different conversations that we need to have, completely different to LLMs. So I think that's why I'm not too worried right now about LLMs. I think they're fairly safe technology. They're not plugged into the internet in a live, autonomous sense.
Okay, so this is the problem, is any hobbyist can go and make an LLM like ChatGPT talk to an agent, which drives it. So Agent GPT, there's many out there that will do LLM-style activities, but also have another agent that's trying to work out what is the next thing I'm going to do. Am I going to search websites? Am I going to go and open a URL? And you can connect these up, basically. So something that plays AlphaGo might be able to also talk to a large language model, which might be able to determine the right next task to then go and do something else. So I guess one of the fear that a lot of these AI researchers have is somebody may accidentally create an AGI, and at that point, it's out there. People are using these to try and hack into websites all the time. So we improve our security by creating them to stop people from trying to hack into websites. So it kind of there is a feedback loop there. We are basically creating reinforcement learning that improves the warfare that's going around. So
yeah. Like I said, I fully agree. I think that's a separate, in my mind at least, that is a completely valid area of concern. But I think it's also separate to some extent to say what we're doing at LBS, where we're trying to improve productivity and things like this. I think those are fairly safe and benign. I think AGI, different kettle of fish.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
And the reason why you hear about it in the news is because people are scared that researchers, but it's not happening now, and it's something that we can't solve. So you won't find Leeds Building Society and Digital the people that could put the genie back in the bottle. That's just not how it will work. It's regulation and governments getting together and deciding how to put regulation on these things. Should you stop using it? No, I think everybody should be using LLMs to improve their productivity, to have a better lifestyle, because they're actually delegating some of their boring tasks like calculation to other things.
Yeah, I say absolutely. I think there's something to that. Again, we were saying before we started that I was saying that if we had got if we were speaking to in the 80s to an AI engineer who was looking for AGI or looking for AI tech, and we showed them ChatGPT or Bard or one of the others or one of our home assistants, they would think it was more or less AGI. Yeah. So it's amazing that we've got it, and it's, like I said, democratized. A lot of it's free. So you would be crazy to not take advantage of it. It's such a benefit, whether it's in your daily life or whether it's in your working day. There are so many ways in which you can use it to drive efficiency and also improve the quality of your life. I've used as an aside, I've used GPT for all kinds of things. Give me an exercise routine. Got a dodgy back. Tell me what exercises I can do to help with that. It's useful in so many ways. Whatever kind of role you want to give it, it will take up. Whether that's clinician or best friend or whatever it is that you want it to do, it will do that if you just tell it. Act in this capacity for 5 minutes. So
okay, I'm going to jump in because we've expertly navigated our way out of the darkness and the doom into the positivity. So well done. So I think we've managed to cover the benefits of AI from a colleague perspective really, really well. But how is Leeds Building Society, it'd be good also to talk how and have utilised it to support members and their experience?
So I think rather than putting AI in front of our members and saying, here, deal with the bot, the better way to do it is to use it behind the scenes. So as an example, in our contact center, we use sort of predictive AI to understand when call volumes go up, when they go down, what the reasons are for people calling in, and when they call in for those specific reasons. And then we can use that information to forecast what we should do in terms of staff planning. So we can say, okay, we know it's a Tuesday at 2 p.m. Probably maybe call volumes will dip a little. We can take 10 colleagues and say, right, we've got some member emails that have come in. This is a good time to respond to those emails. So we can allocate our staff intelligently that way. It's not direct. A member will never see that we're using information that way, but it certainly helps. So I would say that's a few examples of how we use it.
Good. Okay.
Yeah. I think, key to all of this is you need to have data. You need to be able to process the data, and you need to understand how you can actually improve the lives of members so that they don't need to know what's going on. And one of the key things around that is you've got to be good custodians of their data. So you don't train AI models with personally identifiable information. You selectively work out the right bits that could actually improve their lives, and then you create something very bespoke based on that. At And Digital, we created a property valuation service. So we were working with a data set. So we had 25 years of property valuations. We also had information of the distance from the local tube station, the plot size, and we created a valuation service which was within 5% range of other comparable valuation services that are available. But I guess the key when it comes to this is you've got to understand the data that goes in. You've got to understand if it's going to influence the valuation or, influence the way that members can behave, improve their outcomes. But also you've got to measure that the thing that you did was successful.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Agree with that. I was talking about the initiatives that we introduced to confirm that deposits have been made. The next step after that was implemented was to look at the data for the following weeks and see what the impact was. And we could see, the downward trend of those particular types of calls, and then it's worked. And you continue to monitor, and then out of that data you get future trends. So it's an ongoing process. So there's always refinement. The resolution of the data is always improving. We'll continue on that journey.
I think one of the things that I encounter working with many different companies is they just hope that AI is something you can sprinkle on for a couple of weeks and it solves the world problems. And it's not the reality. The reality is you look at it, you learn something, you try a bit better, you learn something else. So it's not always 100% successful, but every time you learn, you adapt and you improve.
Absolutely. I'll add on the confirmation of deposit thing that we were just talking about. We did learn, because what we did first was we sent an initial confirmation. So member makes a deposit and we'll say, yes, received. And then that was the end of that process. And then what we realized was some members were making a small deposit first to make sure that it went through.
Yeah.
And then the next day they'd send the rest of the money. So they were ringing up again. And so we again, in the data, saw that was happening and then changed what we were doing so that every deposit got a confirmation. But yeah, it's an ongoing process and it is continuously evolving.
Yeah.
So,
I guess I'll do a quick playback, I think, in terms of what I've heard there, and then I'm just going to ask two final questions as we look to wrap up. So, being scared of artificial intelligence is too dumber thing to say, and what I mean by that is artificial intelligence is so broad that you can't tarnish everything with the same brush. And what we've spoken about today actually is that Leeds Building Society is utilising AI at this very moment in time, and we were looking at a proof of concept with an LLP. So it's happening now, and people are utilising it for the better. There will always be scarier stuff round the corner, round several corners by the sounds of it, right? But it's something that is being harnessed and should continue to be harnessed with the right kind of use cases by the sounds of it. Awesome. So, Khalid, you started to go into it. So just as we look to wrap up the podcast, I'm just interested in two things. So how much do you use it now? So how much do you use generative AI now? And in a year from now, how do you think you'll be using it?
Interesting. So right now, I'd say I use it every day in one capacity or another. It's important actually to not use it as a search engine because it's not quite the same thing and you won't get the same type of output. So I'd say don't use it as a search engine, but you can use it to generate outputs that will help you with questions that you might have in a general sense. As we've been talking about the various implementations, I think in a few years from now or in a year from now, what I'd like is to not see, in a professional sense, I would want to not see anyone filling in a spreadsheet manually or anything like that. Any kind of grunt work that we do right now, that we'll have a routine. Every month I've got to fill in the spreadsheet. I want to see the end of that, and I think LLMs can bring that about. So that's my hope.
Okay.
So, alluded to earlier, I use it fairly lightly, infrequently, for inspiration. And in a year's time, I suspect I'm not going to be very much different to what I am today.
Okay.
So I definitely use it to, if I have a really good idea, I use it to tell me why it might not be a good idea, because I'm not very good at destroying my own ideas. So to really solidify things that I'm about to do, it's a great way of just going, okay, what are the pros and cons against doing this thing? So I like to use it around that. I use it every day to generate images. I use a service called Midjourney. One of the things, since the adoption of generative AI, I have grown my friendship groups massively. So I now interact with more humans as a result of generative AI. And I think that's the key, is find something that's positive and use it for those positive things rather than just how can I make my job more productive or get rid of people who work in this business. It's not that. It's about trying to solve things that you need to do. A perfect example we didn't touch on earlier, but the purpose of development teams isn't to write lines of code. It's to solve problems. So I will use AI to help me solve problems better rather than just output text. So that's the key. I think a year from now, I'd love to say I've found better things, but the thing I'm really cautious about is one of these other untold costs of AI, which is that it is more energy intensive than a Google search.
Yeah.
Something like 80 times more intensive. So if you query 50 times, then you're using half a litre of water to cool a data center to give you that information. I worked this out on a napkin as I was coming here today. And so I reckon London, if the whole of London used half a litre of water, it would be about 4 or 5 Olympic swimming pools worth of water in one day. And that isn't really sustainable. So my future Adam, I want him to solve how we do this in a more environmental and sustainable way.
No pressure, future.
Is that regardless of the length of the output, or is that dependent on?
So that's based on studies where they've observed people doing it, and they looked at the compute costs, and
so it's probably worse the more you get it to actually process.
Yes.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you everyone for all of your insight, bringing it all to life for us. That was really, really good. I've learned a lot, and hopefully the listeners and the viewers have as well. So on behalf of Leeds Building Society and Digital, thanks for sticking with us. Talk to you soon.
Cheers.
Cheers.